Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. This is Dennis, and I am going to go over Tudor for us today. I want to apologize, though, for having to cancel last week. So just a quick recap. I was supposed to do this episode. Apparently my phone is still on, too. Supposed to have done that about 7 days ago. And I was on call for work. We rotated an emergency hotline, and I had a call come in, and it took 2 hours to deal with. So I missed my record window, and so I pushed it. And I saw some of the live chat afterwards that people were like, "What is this? Why does it say that it's like 7 days away?" And anyway, that is why it said that. So I do apologize for that. I probably won't go the full time today. I tested positive for COVID yesterday. I'm doing okay, but I don't think I'm going to want to talk all that long. But because I cannot do this next Saturday, so FYI, there will not be a live stream next Saturday. This is like my last window. And since I only have one topic, I figured I could probably execute it. Nothing on the wrist. I got my G-Shock out, but again, because I'm under the weather, I haven't even put it on. I'm just going along. I did get my my new little shirt design, though, for those that want the AD Crossing shirt. Those are available. There's a link in the video here somewhere to all of that. But I haven't done any pre-recorded. I haven't done any live, so I don't have anything else to talk about. So we are going to go into Tudor. So why is Tudor falling? We recently looked at the new Morgan Stanley report that comes out every year, takes an examination of the turnover of the Swiss watch industry. And for a recap, for those of you that don't remember, here is a summary of the top 20. Well, the top 21. And the reason we have to do the top 21 is I want to talk about Tudor, and Tudor's not in the top 20 anymore. They were back in 2023. They weren't 20th either. They were a few spots higher than that. But you can see down here at the bottom of the screen in green is Tudor with a 185 million Swiss franc loss, or I should say decline in turnover from 2023 into 2024. And so that pushed it out of the top 20. Incidentally, my understanding is as an overall percentage of, obviously it's not the largest drop in terms of raw Swiss francs. That would have been Omega. However, as a percentage of what they were to what they became, of the 70 some brands that I believe Morgan Stanley looks at, this one fell the most percentage in terms of a decline in turnover. So I thought that's a good topic for us to go ahead and discuss today. So the first thing I want to point out, though, is when I saw this, I was surprised a little bit. I'm not surprised that Tudor did worse than they did in 2023, but and we'll get into that in a moment. But Tudor in 2024 had what I thought was a pretty strong year, and I think a lot of people thought it had a pretty strong year. So just a few other images to give you some reminders of some of the stuff that came out in 2024. And this is not comprehensive. I think it's close to comprehensive, but I did not include everything. So obviously there was the pink Black Bay Chrono that got a lot of attention. That was very difficult for people to initially get a hold of. It was trading above retail. I don't know if it still trades above retail or not, quite frankly, but a lot of people really got into that. Then we hit Watches and Wonders. Now, Watches and Wonders was very interesting to me in 2024 because one of the things I thought Tudor did so well was it was almost happenstance, but they were one of the few players at Watches and Wonders that actually had, I'm going to air quote it, affordable watches like this, like the Black Bay 58 GMT. So the GMT complication in the smaller case size that many people like out of Tudor. They gave you the Coke bezel. Yes, you have gilt numerals on the bezel. So because it's Tudor, they can never give you perfectly everything you would want. But a lot of rumors were going around that Rolex was going to bring back the Coke bezel. They did not. A lot of rumors were going around that Rolex would discontinue the Pepsi bezel. They did not. But they allowed Tudor to go ahead and do an iteration of a Coke bezel. But broadly speaking, Watches and Wonders was mostly just like stratospherically priced, complicated watches. And Tudor was one of the few entities that came in with, sort of an entry-level luxury catalog of stuff like they often do. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit because it was a little frustrating for me to look at Watches and Wonders, because like everything was just absurdly priced. It was like none of this is targeted to. They're not going to sell any of this stuff, and a lot of people said that Tudor won Watches and Wonders, and I think that was a big reason why. I know a lot of it is, people say, well, they gave you the Cook bezel and they did all of that, but I think a lot of it was also just the fact that these were watches you could actually get, that were conceivable to afford. But that wasn't all. There was, of course, we already had a Black Bay 58 in gold. This is like the only truly stupidly priced watch that they came out with last year. But this one, they put it on the gold bracelet. So they had that. This was one of my favorites that came out. If you liked the really classic styling Submariners, I know a lot of people wish that the Tudor subs would come back. This is probably the closest you're getting. No gilt. It's got white and black, and it's that simple. No date. The Black Bay monochrome. So again, I think that one was very positively received. Didn't get as much attention as the Coke bezel Black Bay 58 GMT, but it did pretty well for Tudor. Don't forget the Pelagos, the other thing that Tudor likes to deal in. There were a number of Pelagos editions that came out. So they had the FXD Chrono. This one was a cycling edition that came out. The FXDs are the ones with the fixed lugs. So you have to run these pass-through straps through them. They do not use a spring bar. So I didn't see as people liked this one. It was a good look, but some other stuff resonated a little bit better, I think. Then there was the ceramic Black Bay. They had ceramic Black Bay before, but this was the blue one that they came out with. So we saw that come out of Tudor in 2024. Then, of course, we had that pink chrono earlier that we talked about. Well, they had to do a blue one, right? Boutique edition only, sure, but nonetheless a more popular color broadly than pink was. So that resonated really well. A lot of people thought this looked really good. And then the last one I have that I wanted to show you was another Pelagos FXD. This one was their GMT Zulu time, which again got a lot of really positive reception. So all that is our backdrop, where it's like we see all of this, we see all of these watches that came out, and people were broadly very, very supportive of, at least verbally, of saying, wow, Tudor's doing really good. Look at all these cool things. Yes, iterative. Yes, there was nothing truly revolutionary. The biggest and baddest one of all was going to be the Coke bezel GMT, because it was the GMT down into the Black Bay 58. But again, we're not exactly talking cutting edge stuff here, but obtainable, attractive looking, and all of that. So what went wrong? And let's go ahead. And I have five main five main things that I want to explore with you guys regarding that. But before I do so, I did not greet the chat. So Kevin, good morning. Hope things are going well for you. Koji says, awesome shirt. Thank you, Koji. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member. I appreciate it. And Ken, good morning, Dennis. I hope you're okay. I know I sound not the best, but I can breathe and all of that. So this is actually my first time with COVID. I'd never had it before. At least every time I tested when I was sick, I never had it. So first confirmed time, but I was just like, I thought it was allergies at first. So I'm doing okay. Just a little sore and a little stuffy. So apologies for that. But I could not push this topic again. I felt it was going to be too annoying. I'd have to have done it during the weekday or something. So anyway, 5 things I said regarding why Tudor isn't doing as well as we might think they should be doing. First is the obvious one. Everything is down right now. Not truly, not ever. No, I'm exaggerating. Remember, hyperbole is a core component of everything I do. So here's the chart again. Let me go ahead and get the banner logo out of the way. So you can see, I mean, obviously Rolex is way up, Cartier's up. There are a few that are Patek moving all of those Cubitises, ended up, letting them have a lot of money. So yeah, not everyone actually had lower turnover in 24 than 23, but a lot really, really did. It was a cool year for the for the watch industry. 2024 wasn't the year where things really fell through the floor. It had tapered quite a bit, but people were reluctant to spend. There was a lot of discussions here in the United States of possible impending recession. There are a lot of there are reasons why people didn't want to pay. Not to mention that a lot of these watch brands had raised their prices in an attempt to keep their their revenues up. So that also turned people off. So that's one piece of the equation, is you have to remember that that everything, broadly speaking, was down in 2024. So we didn't expect a bumper crop year. I actually thought that we'd see more brands drop than we did when the Morgan Stanley report came out. And that's another thing I will go ahead and note is the Morgan Stanley report is estimates. Now, I've heard, and I have a link in the video description to another video where someone has interviewed, it's like a 2-hour video, the man who does a lot of the research for the Morgan Stanley report. He very much stands behind the Tudor analysis, and he thinks his estimates are very good on Tudor. I know some people I've seen online have pushed back and said they think that he may have gotten this wrong, and obviously he may have. However, given where he's getting his sources of data, he expressed a high degree of confidence that this estimate is good. So, all right, that's part one of everything's down. Part two for Tudor is China. Now, a lot of you already know China has been down for quite a while. So the Chinese economy is in a state it hadn't been in for quite a while. They have Chinese consumers, broadly speaking, have pulled way back on the amount of luxury spending that they have pushed onto watches, and that cooling of the Chinese market has impacted a lot of brands. However, it impacts some brands more than others. And Tudor, I did not realize this until I heard the discussion, because I'm not all that familiar with the Chinese market. When I heard the discussion of that Morgan Stanley researcher, I did not realize that Tudor is very reliant, disproportionately reliant on China. But it does make sense. When Tudor went away, I'm going to do my air quotes again. When Tudor went away, they didn't go away everywhere. They stayed in China. And then it was around, I think 2012, when Rolex rolled Tudor back out into a lot of other countries like the United States. But during that period, China was the market for Tudor. And my understanding is it was at one stage 90% of their market, roughly 90% of their sales were Chinese sales. And they've always remained reliant on it. More so than I realized. Like, they have watches that are really just for the Chinese market that they have continued to make in parallel with the watches that we are familiar with. So again, it's not that you can't get a Black Bay or a Pelagos or whatever in China, but they have other models that they've always relied on in that particular space. So given all of that, they have diversified more. They have, obviously, with pushing Tudor out into other countries, over the last decade plus, that percentage of reliance on China has dropped. However, according to analysts, Tudor still is very disproportionately reliant on China, the same way you might say Rado is disproportionately reliant on India. So it's still a lot of eggs are in the Chinese basket. And with the Chinese economy down and purchasers being very skittish about making those sort of buys, they're just not moving the units that they've had to rely on. So that's part of the reason why they've dropped so much in that particular category. So there's that aspect. Getting caught up with chat. John, good morning from Miami. Hope things are nice out there. I have never been to Miami. It's been years since I've been to Florida itself. Ken says, big mistake investing Tudors in China. Status is big over there, and Tudor is too weak of a brand. Well, they have recognition over there, but obviously where they, there are other brands that are lower. I mean, so like I think Longines also has a high percentage of reliance on China. I know there are a number of brands that do, but not everyone can afford the Rolex or the Cartier or whatever. Well, Cartier is not a good example, but or a Patek or whatnot. So I think there's some, there's something for that more entry level pricing where there's value if you can obtain it. For whatever reason, though, let me rephrase that. I think the problem that Tudor has right now is those individuals aren't buying watches right now. So because the economy's cooled off, they can't justify buying an entry level watch or whatever. So I think that pressure is part of the problem. It's just they've not been able to increase their portfolio in other countries enough to make them kind of China proof, where, okay, the economy's down everywhere, you're going to drop, but China's disproportionately down. and Tudor is still disproportionately reliant on their sales. They clearly have been having the sales, otherwise they wouldn't have seen this massive level of drop that we've got here on this chart, showing that they've lost 185 million Swiss francs in turnover, or decline in turnover from 23 to 24. So there's that aspect of it, but they were selling well in China, maybe too well. And they've struggled to get a strong enough foothold in other spaces in other countries. But that's just my take on it. Let's see. Joe Bolt, good morning. Let's see. And the movement, Minch, good morning from Los Angeles. Well, hope things are going well. We got Florida and we got California. How fun. And Duncan, good morning. Hope things are going well for you. And thank you for being a club member. All right. So market's down overall. That's item one. China's down significantly, and Tudor is disproportionately reliant on China. That's the second problem for them. Third problem, price bracket competitors are improving. So you see, I've noted TAG and Longines. We just talked about Longines. I think Longines might also have a high proportion coming out of China. I'm not positive of that. I'd have to recheck it. I researched it 2 weeks ago, so I'm trying to remember as best I can. Let me throw the chart back up here so you can see these two. So here's Longines in 7th place for their 2024 ranking. They basically flat, right? They increased by 10 million Swiss francs in turnover from 2023 to 2024. And then TAG had a very good year. And broadly speaking, TAG has been doing pretty well the last couple of years, I think. Their glass Spock's Carreras and stuff are really resonating with collectors. And a lot of people that once sort of thought of them as that entry-level luxury brand are now actually taking a look at them from a collector standpoint rather than like the 90s where TAG was super promoted. And if you didn't know anything about watches, you probably thought of two watches, TAG or Rolex. That's kind of how it worked. But anyway, up 55 million 2024 versus 2023 in terms of turnover. So here's the thing. Tudor occupies a price bracket where there's not all that many competitors. So that sort of, we use these terms like entry-level luxury and along those lines. But if you think about it, what other brands really operate in that bracket? Well, Cartier kind of does. Right? Cartier has a lot of watches that you can get into around the price, like tanks and such, around the price of Tudor. So there's that. Omega, not so much. And that's a tricky one because I think Rolex's perspective, I feel very confident that Rolex thinks Tudor is to compete with Omega. Like that's kind of how they view it. Like they don't view Omega as a Rolex competitor. They might, if they even think about it, say, yeah, Tudor and Omega are like in the same tier. Pricing, that's not true, though, once you move past like DeVille's. So because Omega has driven their prices up so much, other than some DeVille's and some Aquaterras, most of the stuff in the Omega catalog is not at the same price as Tudor. Tudor is quite a bit lower. So that's not really all that true of a competitor. Oris would be a competitor, but they're a very small player. So I don't think that's particularly significant. Rado is kind of in the price bracket at retail that Tudor is. But again, aside from certain countries, Rado is not really, they're like here in the US, Rado doesn't get much discussion. So I think the main competitors are Longines and TAG, and you could say maybe on the fringes, Omega and Cartier. So there's just not very many brands that are playing in that particular price point because so many companies have pushed which is exactly what Omega is doing, keep pushing their prices up higher and higher and higher to make up for the fact that they're selling fewer and fewer watches. And it's not working all that well either for many of those brands. Incidentally, if you look back at the chart again, you could see you could see Omega dropped. They dropped more than Tudor did in terms of raw dollar amount turnover, 210 million Swiss francs. I thought about doing a video about Omega, probably doing a comparison to Cartier, which is doing so well, to really explore what the heck is going on with Omega, because it ain't going great. In fact, most of the Swatch group is not doing very well, but that's a topic for another video. My point is simply that it's been an instinct. We've seen this out of Richemont. We see it out of Swatch to drive the prices up when you're selling fewer watches so that you can make just as much money as you used to without having as many watches actually move. Tudor has not done this to the same extent. Yes, Tudor's prices have gone up. However, that's always been tied to a justification, like using in-house movements and stuff. And that's some of the steps that they've taken. I think it's fair to ask whether doing like in-house movement technologies and things is really for the best for Tudor. Maybe they shouldn't have done that. Maybe they should have still operated at a lower price point. But nonetheless, I see I misspelled Longines in my little banner, but between Tag and Longines, it's I think that they've really started to slip. Tag I feel is pulling ahead of Tudor. And honestly, I like most Longines designs better than Tudor designs personally, though I like, they both make a handsome watch. It's just, there was a time where I think people would have said Longines is lower than Tudor. And we're getting to the point where that is not what people are thinking. So I do think that's definitely a factor as well. Let me see. Ken says in the chat, do you believe what he said that Tudor will reduce supply by a large amount? I asked the SAs and they can only say Tudors are selling great. Sorry, I don't know. I really don't know. I would say I think they'll reduce production somewhat, but I'm not sure I agree with him that he will reduce the production by a large amount. Forgive me. The reason why I'm hesitating on it is the thing that I'm trying to factor in is these brands are first and foremost manufacturers. Stopping the line, slowing the line, reducing production of the line is very difficult for manufacturers to do because it ties to your workforce. It ties to keeping people employed. The line has to stay busy. And just saying, oh, well, we're just going to build, 1,000 watches a day instead of 2,000 watches a day has very significant impacts on the entire ecosystem of their company. So let's say they scale it back. You don't need the same number of employees, so you let them go. But what happens if it recovers and then they need these people back? And again, this is something that any manufacturer would have to consider. If they have to do it, then they'll do it. Absolutely. But I don't know. And Tudor doesn't have the reputation of, like, let's take Cartier, for example. Cartier has, when they have produced too many watches, they buy them back. They go and they buy them back and destroy them to keep the value retention there. Tudor doesn't do this. And we've heard of other brands like Ulysse Nardin has done some of that and such, often more one-off instances where they've tried to restore value to the name of the brand. Tudor's not in the position to do this. I mean, they could with Daddy Rolex's pockets, they could do it, but that's not what they're oriented to be. So the thing I keep running into is I don't know if Tudor cares. Like, I don't know if Rolex cares what Tudor's value retention is. And I don't know that they care if they produce too many watches. They'll just go on the gray market and whatever. So I do think it would make sense for them to reduce, given how much they fell in this chart. I do think it would make sense for them to scale it back and produce fewer. But I'm not going to go so far as to say that they will do it by a large amount. I don't know what we define as a large amount, though. So, like, I'm thinking less than 25%. So that's why I don't say large. But again, it's really just a blind guess on my part. Greg says, Tudor is a middle-class aspirational brand. Global middle class is increasingly squeezed. And the movement says, until Longines is pulled out of department stores, it will continue to appear as a lower brand. That is a good point. There are certain things I like personally as a collector. I've never owned a Longines, by the way. I need to declare that. They're more complicated watches, are so modular, which again, doing modules is totally normal. All sorts of brands do it, but their watches tend to get really thick. And so that's a criticism of mine is Longines feels like they don't care how thick their watches get. They'll just stack stuff on top of it to make it nice. But the thing is they still look good. So there is that. Ken says Rolex can back them. Their 80s are too overstocked. Nobody wants them. And Underachieving says, I almost bought a couple Tudors, but they always add a wart or two that makes me buy a Rolex instead. I've discussed this before on this channel, that they do that on purpose. But yeah, the Coke bezel having gilt numbers instead of just straight up white numbers. There's always something with the Tudors. I've owned a couple Tudors. I just don't own any anymore. They make a nice watch, don't get me wrong, and none of this is a criticism of their quality. I've been pretty satisfied with the Tudors I've had. One just didn't fit in my collection anymore because I had too many other watches that basically did the same thing, and the other was too big for me. And I've decided not to wear giant dive watches anymore. So Ken adds, no other high-end luxury brand has a sister brand that they use as a sandbox and play testing area. The model doesn't work. Yeah, it's, again, are they, that comes up a lot, Ken, but do they really test all that much? I mean, other than like materials, like doing ceramics and stuff, titaniums and things, it just doesn't feel all that creative to me. We get GMT watches, but Rolex has GMT watches. We get dive watches, but Rolex has dive watches. We get chronos using Breitling movements, but Rolex has a chrono that used to use a Zenith movement and now uses an in-house movement. I struggled necessarily to identify what like big brain thing they're getting out of Tudor by doing that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I do think that they do it as a sandbox, but I'm not sure what they're building in the sandbox that they ever plan to use with Rolex. I don't know. Maybe they're just looking to see if they got some sort of huge hit Tudor watch on their hands, like the pink chrono. Maybe that means they'll put out a pink Daytona. I don't know. I'm at a loss for what Rolex needs to learn from Tudor. So, let's see. Al, welcome to Livestream, by the way. Personally, I can't get on board with anything with a snowflake hand, aka a big square blob hand. I currently own one Tudor with a normal handset. I had one with a normal. I did have one with a snowflake. I don't love the snowflake. I don't hate the snowflake. I'm indifferent to the snowflake, but I will not accept a chronograph with the snowflake. It blocks too much of the subdial space. Regular old dive watch, I'm fine with it. But to me, it's a bridge too far on chronographs. Ken says they use Tudor to put all the in-demand features, Coke, Gold Hulk. Sure, but again, I don't understand like what Rolex gets. I guess maybe they think since we'll never do it again as Rolex, we'll do it with Tudor and we'll make money on both sides of the table or something. I'm not sure. Movement says I own the Black Bay Blue and added the T-Fit class. Pretty much a perfect watch in my opinion. I have not owned one with a T-Fit, and I've heard very nice things about the T-Fit. All right. We've hit three things so far. So Tudor's down because everything's down. Tudor's down because they're disproportionately reliant on China, and China is way down. And the price bracket that they compete in have competitors that are improving and are stealing market share from Tudor, namely Longines and TAG. So let's talk about number 4 of my 5 reasons why I think Tudor has fallen on this chart. And that has been I know this is a big shock to you guys. They rely on 2 whole models, and that's all they rely on. Black Bay and the Pelagos. Pelagos, I don't know. I'll say it both ways because I'm completely inconsistent in everything I do. But, I mean, here's the thing. Setting aside like China and the specific Chinese watches and such that they have sold, this is what they do. They had the Black Bay. It put them back on the map of discussions. It got a lot of attention. It's a very attractive watch. It's basically inoffensive. Snowflake hand controversy aside, the Black Bay is essentially an inoffensive, vintage-inspired model. And then you have the Pelagos, which is a very more forward-thinking, again with a snowflake hand, forward-thinking, modern. It feels more tooly would be maybe the way I would say, because it's not trying to appeal to vintage cues to get people to buy the watch. But they're both basically just dive watches. So that's what Tudor's got. And you run into the same thing. I'm sorry. I just glanced. It's pronounced Pelagos. So I just typed it out the same way I would. So anyway, I just caught it out of the corner of my eye. We've seen this same thing though, with all sorts of brands, right? Panerai's got to be a case in point. Okay, so you have the radio mirror, and then you got whatever the other one is. I can't ever remember the name of. So they got like 2 models too that are both the same dive watch. It's like one has a crown guard and one doesn't. So when you get stuck on selling on 2 different models, and that's basically all you have going for you, and those 2 models no offense to Black Bay or Pelagos fans, the two models kind of look sort of the same to me because they use the same handsets. There's only so many color iterations, complication combinations, and bezel insert changes and material compositions you can do before you've exhausted the collector's ability to want to buy any more of them. I mean, how many people are going to buy the pink chrono, the blue chrono, the dark blue chrono, the black chrono? I mean, it gets silly after a while. And this is going to be true for anything. But with Tudor, not unless they, they came out with something new in the Royal line, which I think maybe they did last year. I didn't point it out to you guys, but I think they did a new Royal. They didn't do a new iteration in the 1926, which they never promote. Maybe an aviation watch or whatever. I'm not saying where they need to take it because I don't have answers. I'm just a commentator. But what I'm saying is their broad overall portfolio is you either buy this dive watch or this dive watch. Maybe it's in ceramic, maybe it's in steel, maybe it's in bronze, maybe it's in titanium. Maybe it's got fixed lugs, maybe it's got spring bars. Like they all kind of look. It's I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Zoolander, but this part where Will Ferrell's character criticizes Zoolander's modeling poses, and he's just like, Magnum, blue steel, they're all the same, and they're all the Tudors are the same too. It's at some point it's like, oh, I didn't get the exact shade. I mean, again, when we went over here's my case in point. So the Black Bay monochrome, right? We had this watch before, didn't we? But it was in gilt. So they finally did it right and got us the white numbers and indices and everything that we wanted, and not the Fotina or the gilt or however you want to criticize it. But it's like they changed one part of one color. And how many people are going to own both of those? There will be people that will go, oh, you finally fixed what I wanted, and sell their one like this Black Bay 58 GMT. I know plenty of people who bought this who don't like that it's got gilt. In 2 years, when Tudor makes this white instead of gilt, there will be some people who will buy it again and sell this one. But there were others who passed on this one because they know Tudor's going to do it. And there will also be people that will be like, even though I like white better than gilt, I am not buying another watch that is basically the same watch. So I think that's what I'm getting at when I drop this banner. Like it starts to feel all the same. And this is a struggle for anyone because, again, it's manufacturing. Line has to move. We have to keep production going. There are only so many case shapes. I mean, my biggest criticism of Rolex is how many would I really want in the oyster case? Because it all looks the same. Like the case is the case. I don't need 5 different oyster case watches. I don't love the case shape enough to want a whole bunch like that. So, and that's true for like Grand Seiko and everyone else. It's like they love to use the same case because then the tooling doesn't have to change. But what was once a hit can't stay a hit forever is kind of the thought. Maybe if you're AP and you can keep figuring out ways to get people to buy more and more samey looking Royal Oaks, you can do it. I don't know, but we've seen Panerai. Panerai is my go-to here because we've seen Panerai struggle with the same sort of concept, and I think that's what we're running into here with Tudor. It's just been, again, it's been like a decade since, it's been like 15 years since the Black Bay. I don't remember when the Pelagos first dropped, but they've done basically all the hit stuff, like all the popular takes on it, like all the right colors. Like we have our blacks and our blues, and now they're doing the more fun colors. But it's just they're kind of in an inconvenient boat, in my opinion. But so anyway, that's my fourth reason why I think they've struggled in 2024 is a lot of people already own Tudors that wanted Tudors, and so if you wanted a Black Bay or a Pelagos, you probably already found one and you didn't need to buy one in 24. You bought it in 23, 22, 21. You did what I did, like in 2020, you bought one used. So that's, it hurts them on this chart because there's just no reason to get it's a slightly brighter shade of blue. I better go out and buy that in the case, size, and configuration and complication structure that I already own. It doesn't make any sense, which is why they don't sell them. So let me see. Ken says, They don't build watches to what folks really want. There's always a flaw purposely built in order to make us still want a Rolex. I agree with you about that. I do think that is a strategy. Duncan says, for me, Tudor are a strange brand. They were nowhere to be seen in the United Kingdom in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Tag and Longines were much better known. They exploded in the 2000s at the time the Rolex hype took off. Okay. Movement says, Tudor is a brand where you find the one you like and you don't need a second. Yeah, I think that's probably true for a lot of watches as well. But Koji says, but the Black Bay is really ridiculously good looking. A very good Zoolander throwback. And yes, it is. And I've thought about getting another Black Bay, 58 that would better fit my wrist size, because yeah, I think they make a very attractive watch. None of this is a criticism on the watches. I would never have owned them if I thought they were ugly. Watchdog Podcast. Welcome to live stream, by the way. To be fair, monochrome is thinner. Method is certified and has that method. Metis, right? Yeah, you've corrected it later. I was like, Method is certified. Well, you know what? They get the Lutherans and the Presbyterians, and you might have a market there. But anyway, so Metis certified and has that great 5-link bracelet. I have not handled one of the Tudor 5-link bracelets yet. I need to go to my AD and try them because I have heard very good things. So thank you for mentioning that. There were other changes besides what I highlighted, but I never let the truth stand in the way of a good point. So Ken adds, they won't make any single watch more than 10% better than another. It will kill the catalog. Hence, they all need to be similar. That's interesting to kind of have like a percentile tweak. They do a lot of iterative tweaking, but iterative tweaking is like Rolex's bread and butter. So that's also, I think, kind of baked into their DNA as a company. So speaking of that, let me go ahead and hit my fifth and final reason why I think Tudor's declined so much in the 2024 versus 2023. And it's not really why they declined. It's more of a why we shouldn't be as surprised as we were. Again, showing you all of those watches that I pulled up here earlier about like all these things that people like, other than like this gold one, every single one of these had positive reaction. Everyone I know criticized, like, why is Tudor making 18 karat gold watches? We don't understand what the market is for that. All this other stuff. And the only other watch I remember them coming out with was, I think, a Tudor Royal, which was part of the reason I didn't include it, is no one cared. But all these other ones were popular, right? Like people said, oh, that looks good. That looks good. Again, it's a very handsome design that they run with. All these look good. Some of them look more good than others. But the reality is that the community, from Hodinkee to other print media to YouTube channels like mine, have given a huge, disproportionate amount of coverage to Tudor than it really ever deserved. And by deserved, I mean, compared to where its sales have always been on these charts, it has never made sense why it makes sense to me, but in a vacuum, in looking at the market, it doesn't make sense why we cover Tudor as much as we do. The reason why it makes sense to me is I can tell you, if I do a video on Tudor, like there's a new release at Watches and Wonders, when I give my opinions on things, Tudor will be near the top of my list to make sure I do timely. And the reason is I get views on it. But Tudor's, like in 2023, they were going to be, closer to around 17th or so on this chart. But a Tudor video does better than an Omega video, way better than a Cartier video, or Longines, or all these other brands that outperform them in terms of turnover. So I've read online all sorts of theories, like Hodinkee was getting, I've like seen people claim that they thought Hodinkee was like getting something in order, like they had an agenda to push Tudor. People like to read about them and talk about them. And I think part of that is that Rolex connection is what I think that's the real reason why that's there is, people hate using, some people hate using those phrases like calling Tudor the baby brother or the sister brand or whatever, they're basically making Tudor sound more diminutive. But the reality is Rolex is the number one on this chart. It's always been the number one on the chart. And the demand for Rolex, or at least is still there, and the turnover of Rolex has greatly improved because they're able to they've been able to turn out more watches, not to mention the prices did go up. So having that connection with Tudor is always going to advantage Tudor in the conversation, because if you can't get a Rolex, don't want to spend as much on a Rolex, whatever, but you like some of those design motifs, Tudor has a lot of that stuff that feels Rolex-esque. And even if it didn't feel Rolex-esque, you would still associate it with the brand because they're owned by the same foundation. So it gets disproportionate attention. So when I put that banner up, what I mean about this is this drop looks worse than it is to us because we talk about Tudor so much. It comes across like everyone's buying them, but it's never been true. Like Tudor has not been outperforming IWC. They've not been outperforming TAG or Tissot even. So it's like we make it sound like everyone's buying a Tudor because people reward us by reading and viewing our stuff when we talk about it. But the sales have never really been there to that, not to the level that the coverage is. And so that has created a bubble, an artificial bubble where we think Tudor is in the top 10 on this list, and they ain't ever been in the top 10. They don't sell that many watches. They don't have the turnover. So anyway, those were my 5 points. And let me see what all you guys have here. Dos, I'll say Dos Prompt. Welcome to Livestream, by the way. I've been 99% close to buying almost every Tudor, but never 100%. I can see that. Again, getting back to kind of what Ken has mentioned, like they iterate, and there's always something that they like to do that deliberately holds back the model, because Rolex would rather you want a Rolex because they'll have higher turnover on that Rolex. So it makes sense. But anyway, that's all I had for this episode. My voice, I know, is giving back out. So I'm going to go sit with my COVID infected self and drink fluids and end this here. I will not be live streaming next Saturday. I have a conference, so I won't be available to do that. So I'll probably be back in 2 weeks. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully it wasn't too painful to listen to me today. Anyone who's watching the recording, leave a comment about Tudor and what you think might be responsible. I only gave 5 reasons why I think they've fallen so much in 2024, but there are plenty of other reasons that may be true, or some of mine may have been false. So go ahead and let me know what you think. I will go back and read those. And until next time, take care, everybody.